Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Natalie's behind the scenes today, but she says hello to you with a program that looks at Israel. We look at the news, we look at features from Israel, and in the Jerusalem Post just this week, as we've come in the studio, Jerusalem Post, just in this corner, it says Blue Hue, and it talks about the Bible Lands Museum. The Jerusalem Post reported that the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem is currently hosting blues concerts with jazz musicians, as well as having a special Out of the Blue exhibition. The dynamic Out of the Blue exhibition looks at the color blue, the ancient biblical priesthood, the Israeli flag, and even outer space. And in the studio today to talk about the exhibition and the Tekhelet is Dr. Baruch Sterman from the... And I'm going to have help with the name of the company or organization.
Tekhelet.
Tekhelet. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Baruch, thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise in this very important subject. Dr. Baruch Sterman is originally from the United States. He's a doctor of physics from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's been a leading technologist, entrepreneur, and executive in the high-tech sector, specializing in telecommunications, computer security. He's the co-founder of the
Tekhelet
Association, which is, you're going to have to look that up on the internet so that you will have to know how to say it as well. Of this association, which has succeeded in restoring the ancient biblical blue dye, and he's been featured in the Israel National News, Times of Israel, Breaking Israel News, and CBN News. He's the author of the book, and we're going to be talking about this today. You want to get this book onto your bookshelf. It's called The Rarest Blue, and this is the book you've written all about the story.
Together with my wife.
Together with his wife, Judy. And you're going to want to get hold of that as well. And if you can just see, I've got on here this beautiful little booklet as well on the Tekhelet. So tell us a little bit about the Tekhelet, and what is it, the significance of this in the Bible?
Well, about 1750 BCE, on the island of Crete, some Minoan entrepreneur discovered that you could actually, using the snails that were on the shore of that island, you could actually produce these magnificent purple and blue dyes that were fabulously beautiful, and that changed the entire world, the fashion world of the ancient Mediterranean, and even the economy. Within years, the entire Mediterranean world was madly desirous, as Pliny says, of the purples and these blues. Anybody who was anybody wanted to be wearing them.
So it's like a blue dye that you would put in clothing.
Correct.
Is that right?
And you have to remember that the dyes in those days, you had, some vegetable dyes and plants that maybe would give you a little bit of reddish color, brownish color, but pretty much by and large, you wore what the animal gave you, or the sheep, or the hides. You had flax, linen, which was also, but everything was kind of a dull gray or white. Dyeing was very, very, very hard to get to come by in any sense, but certainly beautiful purple and blue was just a magnificent discovery.
Now, in the Bible, it talks about, from memory, the first thing I can think of is the tabernacle, before the temple, the tabernacle in the wilderness. Right. Is that the blue?
Yes.
And
yes, so exactly. So once the world became aware of these dyes, the people with clout and the people with money, they were the ones who were able to afford it, and the ones who really took over the industry. So the princes, the kings, the emperors, they pretty much cornered the market.
So the royal blue,
the royal blue, and the Tyrian purple, as we know it. That's what we're talking about now. To the Israelites, something which was fabulously expensive, precious, and beautiful was not there simply for people to show their own honor and glory, but rather it needed to be used in the service of the king, the real king, King of Kings, and as part of the kingdom of heaven. And so the coverings in the tabernacle were made out of these purples and blues. Wow. The clothes of the high priest were made out of the purple and blue. And this is really the most important part for our purposes. There is a commandment in the Bible that every Israelite wear one string of Tekhelet, of blue, on their clothes. And this was why, because when the Jews came out of Egypt, slaves with a slave mentality, God said to them, that's not what I have in mind for you. Each and every one of you is royalty, part of the kingdom of heaven, and the servant of the King of Kings. So every single person wears this royal insignia on their clothes to remind them at all times they're no longer slaves. They are in the service of the highest and the loftiest of goals.
Which is the talit, the tzitzit, sorry,
right.
the tzitzit.
Exactly right. And
the string on the...
And the commandment is,
right.
and you shall put onto the corner fringes of your garment a thread of Tekhelet, a thread of blue. And that's interesting because the blue, the Tekhelet, was really what the Israelites concentrated on as the holiest of colors, if you will. Not so the rest of the world. The rest of the world really was very excited about these colors, but mostly the purple. The Romans and all of the Mediterranean kingdoms, they kind of felt that the purple was the more beautiful one. To the Israelites, it was the Tekhelet, the blue. And I think that was not only because of the fact that it was so beautiful and so costly and so expensive, but also because it reminded them of the infinite possibilities of the sky, of the sea, and of the relationship with an infinite creator. I think that was really part of what they felt.
So presumably, this discovery which was used in the tabernacle for the fringes, the tzitzit, got lost somewhere in history.
Well, that's the problem. And as I like to say, if you want to figure out historical mysteries, usually the answer is follow the money. And who can make a profit on this? And when you had these beautiful colors and the dyes, anyone who could wanted to control, wanted to have a monopoly on the dyeing and on the selling, on the wearing. And so, especially as you get into Greek and Roman times, you start to get all of these restrictions on who can deal with the shellfish and who can catch them and who can sell the dyes that come out of them.
So the shellfish is actually the way that you produce the dyes?
There's a gland inside. This is just the shell. I didn't bring the actual guy in here. But on the back of the snail, the kind of the worm that lives inside of these shells, there's a small gland, and that's the precursor to the dye, and you can use that with a little bit of chemical magic, which they knew about in ancient times.
So that was what they were using in ancient times to make
correct.
Correct.
This is called, today we call it the Murex trunculus. Murex, it was called by the Talmud, it's called the chilazon. The rabbis absolutely knew about it. And one of the things that you see at the Bible Lands Museum, and it really is an amazing thing, you see 2,000-year-old cloth that was dyed from these murex. You see these shells, which are 2,500 years old, that were found along the beaches, the northern beaches of Israel and into Lebanon. And so you see coins with these little shells on them. From Tyre, it's already in the times of after the destruction of the temple, so we're talking about 200, 2nd century, 3rd century after. But what is so striking about that is that the rabbis of the Talmud held these things in their hand. They saw Herod and the little stripe on his cloth that we have now and that you can see in the Bible lands. They saw the coins from Tyre. They held them in their hands. When they went to Tyre and to Sidon to get a cup of coffee, that's what they paid with. So when they see these snails on there, it was part of their life. It was part of their culture. It was part of their context. It wasn't like we have today to kind of try to figure out reenacting and trying to rediscover that. And so I was saying the rediscovery is because of the loss, and the loss happened because the restrictions kept piling up. Mm-hmm. At one point, Justinian the emperor writes, anyone who deals with these blues or purples that come from the shellfish, that's a crime tantamount to treason, punishable by death. So for the ancient Jews in the 3rd, 4th, 5th century here in Israel, it was very expensive to wear this Tekhelet. It was very difficult to get the Tekhelet because only the Romans were involved in making it, and it was dangerous. They really risked losing their property or their life if they wanted to wear it.
And do you think it was also connected because there was the destruction of the temple and then the exile? Was that part of the story as well?
I would say yes, but I would say it in a different way. I think that the destruction of the temple and that had a different effect, because you have actually not just the destruction and the revolt, but you have three revolts in a row. The revolt, the Great Revolt, where the temple was destroyed. Then there's the revolt of the diaspora, where Alexandria Jewry is destroyed and it moves into Israel. And then just a few years later, the Bar Kokhba revolt. All of this against the Romans. The Romans probably became very, very sensitive to anything that had nationalistic identity associated with it. And the Jew wearing the Tekhelet, saying, "Here I am, a free man and an emperor. Your emperor wears these blues and purples. I also do." That was probably a very pernicious and difficult thing for the Romans to hear, especially in the aftermath of all of these revolts. So I think that part of the clamp down on the Tekhelet industry and on wearing Tekhelet was part of the suppression of national identity.
And was anything else affected by it? So, in other words, were the pogroms in Russia or the Holocaust, was that another, as we come into recent days? Because I guess it's only recently, if I'm right, that this rediscovery of the biblical blue of the Tekhelet is that right?
Yes.
Am I
well,
right?
So let me bring the history into play. The last time we hear about Tekhelet is in around the year 600. The Talmud records that it's still around. But by the year, let's say by the 8th century, the Jewish sources lament and say, "And now we have only white, for Tekhelet is gone." And so the fringes that were worn...
So this was written somewhere, was it?
So this is written in the Midrash,
right.
in the Midrash Tanchuma, and it's and again it's telling us that there's no more Tekhelet. Now, what happened at that period? What happened? We believe that it was these world war, but the world at war between the Byzantine Romans and the Arab Muslim Caliphate, where all along the Mediterranean, from Israel and all the way up to Constantinople over the next 1,000 years, you have people, you have this war going on. That's exactly where the Tekhelet was dyed and where the purple was dyed. That's exactly where the Murex live. So all of those dye houses would have been targeted, we believe, by the Muslim conquerors, not only because it was a symbol of Rome and Rome's aristocracy, but also because it funded the war effort. They were making a lot of money off of this, and it made sense economically and militarily to target those places. The dye houses were destroyed. The secrets to how the dye was made were lost. And even the source of the dye was basically, it slipped into obscurity. That is probably what happened. And 1,300 years have gone by, and no one really knew what this chilazon was and how it was dyed with and where it was found, and all of those things are lost.
If you've just joined us, we've got Dr. Baruch Sterman in the studio, and we're talking about the amazing subject, the biblical blue, the Tekhelet. And it's really like, we were talking a bit about, the redemption and the coming back. There's the coming back to the Jewish people have come back to Israel after thousands of years. Jerusalem again is now in the hands of the Jewish people. The 70 years of the nation of Israel, and we've got this fantastic discovery of the Tekhelet. So with all the scientific equipment that we have now, how is it that we didn't, or how is it the Jewish people didn't discover the blue in recent times?
That's a fantastic question, and it's a very, very important question. Already 200 years ago, you have people that are starting to research these snails. You have archaeology going on in the Promised Land from the French and the English and the German, who are discovering mounds and mounds of these crushed shells, millions of these crushed shells along the shores of the Mediterranean. And it seems clear that these were the snails that were used in the ancient purple and blue dye industry. But at the same time, the chemists realized that you could, out of these snails, you could get this magnificent purple dye. And now here is the problem. If these snails are the source of the ancient Tekhelet, and these snails produce purple, and Tekhelet is blue, one of those statements has to go.
Right.
And that is exactly the problem that anybody who came to these issues and tried to work with it.
So they managed to discover that the snail produced a color, but it wasn't the right color.
It wasn't the right color. Now, if you were a secular archaeologist, you would just say, well, we had it all wrong. Tekhelet wasn't blue, it was really this purple. But the rabbis who were involved in this, specifically Rabbi Herzog, Rabbi Isaac Herzog, who was the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel way before he became that. In 1914, he wrote a doctorate for the University of London on the whole subject of Hebrew porphyrology. He invented that word, porphyrology. It means the study of purple. And you don't have to be surprised about that. Rabbi Herzog was quite an amazing person. He spoke 12 languages. And he was just amazing, completely self-taught. Completely self-taught.
Wow.
And eventually got his doctorate in this topic. And he collected everything that there was at that time to know, including the chemistry, marine biology, archaeology, linguistics, whatever you wanted, he knew it. And he ends his doctorate with this problem. I would love to believe that the Murex trunculus was the source of the Tekhelet. Everything points to it. But I also can't give up on Jewish tradition. For thousands of years, we believe that Tekhelet reminds us of the sky, and as pretty as this purple is, it doesn't really remind you of the sky, and It doesn't remind you of the sea. So he couldn't answer this question. In 1985, that question was answered.
Wow.
By
so
accident.
Very
recently. And that was answered pretty much by accident. If you ever have the opportunity to see the dyeing, that's very amazing. But it's even more amazing to smell the dyeing, because that is really something that will knock you off your feet. The smell is absolutely atrocious. And so anybody who's going to deal with this has to deal with it outside. And the researchers who were doing this work, Professor Otto Elsner and Professor Ehud Spanier here in Israel, moved their research outside and noticed, after they did the chemical reduction, all of the things that they needed to do to get the dye to work and to bond to the wool, they indeed did get this beautiful purple. But that was only on cloudy days. On sunny days, they got something completely different.
Wow.
And that's this magnificent, beautiful blue, sky blue dye.
So this dye was produced because the material was left outside in the sun.
At a very, very specific phase in the dyeing process, and only during that phase. If the solution is exposed to ultraviolet light of the sun, then it changes to be this beautiful blue as opposed to a purple. And that was a discovery that led the way. Now, the ancient dyers would have, of course, known this, because they were doing their work outside. Rabbi Herzog,
on the shores.
Right, but Rabbi Herzog in England, where, as you know, there's no sun, he would never have discovered this. And that's why it was really something that took so long to discover.
Wow, amazing. Now, you brought in also, this is the tassel, what we would call the prayer shawl,
the fringes on the prayer shawl.
The fringes that are worn on the side of the prayer shawl. And if you look at most of the Jewish prayer shawls, they are white, the fringes, or they're like a string at the side.
Yep.
And this one is blue. So is this actually the Tekhelet being used? Wow.
Yes, indeed. And then, if you don't mind me getting undressed in your studio here, I'll show you the way I have it on my fringes, which I wear. There is white, and there's blue, which should remind us of a flag that we know and love. And in fact, there's a story behind that and why the flag is blue and white. But this is the way that they would have worn it in ancient times, the blue and the white together, with all kinds of different ways of the intricate twisting.
So you have that. That's not because you want to have a fashion statement. That's actually a commandment in the Bible where it says on your garments to remember the commandments. You have
exactly right. And this is the way that the commandment was meant to be fulfilled. We're only reinstating what was a long time ago. We're not doing something new. We're doing something that's very, very, very old.
Now, one of the interesting things is because it's from the scripture, that's what basically we're talking about, that they wear this, the tzitzit, the strings at the side, at the corners of the garment. And I was looking at Exodus 24, you might be familiar with it, 9 to 10, where Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel, which is a whole amazing thing in itself. and under his feet was something, a pavement made of lapis lazuli, I think is
lapis
the right,
lazuli.
right, which was a bright blue as the sky. And some people say, I don't know if it's true, but one of the reasons you wear the blue is because of the sky, and this scripture about under God's feet there's this pavement or the sea of glass of blue, and of course the flag of Israel.
Yes.
You know, the white and the blue. That's connected, I guess, to that, and that was before the rediscovery of the 1948 with the
Right. Now, the myth or the legend has it that when Herzl wanted to propose a flag for the nascent Jewish state, he had some ideas about some socialist symbols or whatever it was, and a man by the name of David Wolfson got up and said, the Jewish people already have a flag. It's the flag that we've been wearing for all of these years, and that is the talit, the prayer shawl, and the prayer shawl is blue and the white, so this will be our flag. It's a beautiful story, but it is there is certainly a kernel of truth in the fact that the blue and the white were really something that was associated, the Jewish people associated that with their identity and with what they wore and what they believed with their colors for 1,000 years. But I think that there's something even more behind that, because the story of the loss and the rediscovery of Tekhelet is intimately bound with the story of Israel. We lost Tekhelet not when the temple was destroyed, because there was still quite a strong Jewish community in Israel in the years 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century. The main exile of the land of Israel happened during the Arab conquest, when pretty much that was more or less the destruction of the Jewish community here in the land of Israel. And that's when Tekhelet was lost.
Wow.
And for all of those years, 1,000 years, 1,300 years, Jews had the choice to use any blue that was available to them instead of the authentic, true Tekhelet. But they chose not to. They said, it's either the authentic or nothing. And the same thing is true about the Jews who lived in all of the areas of the diaspora. For all of those years, they could have chosen to become completely assimilated and just members of those communities, but they said, no, we have our authentic religion and our authentic land that one day we will return to. And when they did finally return to their land as we are here now, that's when Tekhelet came back. Tekhelet came back to us just over the last few years by and large, by four people, myself included, Rabbi Tevger, who was an immigrant from Russia, my friends Joel Guberman and Ari Greenspan, who are we grew up together in New Jersey. So it's this ingathering of the exiles, the ingathering of the diaspora, and bringing together all of these talents of the Jewish people here in their land, which is something that was able, I think, to bring back this Tekhelet. So the fact that it's the flag of Israel is no coincidence.
It's amazing, and we see in the Bible where it talks about the land of Israel being fruitful again when people return here, when the exiles come back to live in the land, and the innovations that are being, discoveries that are being made in Israel, and this discovery of the Tekhelet. If they want to know more, if you would like to know more about this subject, then they've got to get the book. And this is the rarest blue. How can they get the book? What's the best
Amazon.
way? From Amazon. So
yeah.
Get the book from Amazon. And thank you so much for coming in the studio today, Baruch.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate your time, and we will be right back after this.
Shalom, dear friends, wonderful. We are finishing the 10 Commandments, and today we are doing the number 10, which is do not covet. Do you remember also how we say it in Hebrew? Aseret advarim. So this is in Exodus 20, and it's like, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female slave, or his ox or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. So in Hebrew it is lo tachmod ba'it re'acha, lo tachmod eshet re'acha, ve'avdo, va'amato, ve'shocho, V'chamocho v'kol asher le'reacha. Now, do you remember last time we say Re'ah is your neighbor, but is also your friend and your comrade. So we really don't want to harm the person who is not far from us. So if you look at this commandment, it's really about the sin of envy. And we have to make the choice every day and almost all the time if we want to allot things just for ourselves or if we want to be more generous and be happy for the people to have what they have. So we have to exercise our choices. If you look, desire leads to coveting, and coveting can lead to stealing, and stealing can even lead to murder. So we can see that we have to guard our hearts for the thing that we see and not wanted them all the time, but be happy with what God is giving us. And I think this is the good side of this commandment, is that we have to be thankful. We have to say, thank you, God, for what you have given me. And when we look at all the good things that we have, it's like it takes away the side of coveting. So we need really to have a positive way of looking at what we have. So we look again at this verse, which is the last commandment in the 10 Commandments, and is in Exodus 20, is do not covet, and in Ivrit is lo tachmod. We've done all the 10 Commandments together, and we saw the depth of them. And what we need to do in this last commandment, what we see is that we can be thankful for what we have, and is really helping us to live in harmony with the people who are next to us. Now we'll see you next week. Bye.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Very exciting subjects of the Tekhelet. Don't forget to get Baruch Sterman, Dr. Baruch Sterman's book, The Rarest Blue. We love to receive your emails. You can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.